Hey VC, I wanted to do a quick video on albums that I don't listen to nearly enough. There are certain albums in my collection that I really like a lot, but for whatever reason, I feel like I don't listen to them as often as I should. Maybe it's just because I have so many different listening choices. I've got a lot of records and CDs, and so these albums are competing for my listening time with the other music that I have. But always, when I think about these albums, I'm like, why don't I listen to these more often? I really should play these more often than I do. Not that I never play them, but these albums I enjoy so much that I still feel like they're getting shortchanged in my collection and are competing unfairly for some of my listening time because they are so good. So the first one that I'm going to show, this is Belle and Sebastian, The Life Pursuit. This is excellent British power pop. So many different influences on here. I've loved Belle and Sebastian for a while. All their albums are great. You can't go wrong. But for me, this one is as good as it gets. So many influences on here. You hear T-Rex, you hear David Bowie, you hear the Smiths. Just gorgeous power pop. Some of the best tracks on here, Act of the Apostle, and then there's actually a reprise of Act of the Apostle Part 2. It's just a very piano-based, it's almost got like a bossa nova type rhythm to it, but it is so infectious. These songs will stay with you, and they're those songs that you can't get out of your head after you listen to them. But they've got, like I say, T-Rex, Bowie, just all the great early post-punk influences, and some even 70s rock influences that you hear on here. Just gorgeous. So very British, but I'm a huge fan of all things UK, so I cannot recommend this album strongly enough. This is a band that I do not hear at all. I don't hear anybody talk about this band in the vinyl community, and I don't know if there is just fatigue for this band because they were all over the radio, kind of sold out a little bit. I think they've lost their way. They've gotten more into the mainstream top 40 than how they started out. But their debut album, for me, still stands up today, and I rank it alongside some of my favorite albums of the early 2000s, and I'm talking about Coldplay, Parachutes. This is a fantastic album. Reminds me a lot of Radiohead, kind of the Benz, OK Computer era Radiohead, just very melodic. Before they started getting into writing these self-conscious anthems, feeling like every album had to have some radio-friendly hit. This has got the track Yellow on it, which actually is my least favorite track on this album. That's how strong this record is. Can't recommend this one enough. If you are not familiar with Coldplay's early stuff, or the only Coldplay you're familiar with is some of the stuff from XYZ Forward, check this one out. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised, and it has so many different surprises on here and rewarding moments. I think it's fantastic. My favorite Coldplay album, definitely hands down. Neil Young, this is his Harvest Moon album, and almost like he did an album in the 90s of all of his best work. You've got Neil Young, the country flavored Neil Young with You and Me, and Harvest Moon, kind of that light, almost a track. Those tracks could have appeared on the original Harvest album. From Hank to Hendrix reminds me a bit of his kind of later 70s stuff, but just a solid album. And the funny thing about this, I need to play this more, is I went to throw this on the CD player today and realized that my CD is not working. For whatever reason, it won't play in my CD player. So I guess the reason I don't listen to this one more is because I can't, because I've got a damaged copy and it won't play. So that's kind of a bummer. But anyway, I still listen to it on Spotify, and it's a great record. Love Neil Young. and such an outstanding record. At this stage in his career, I mean, we're talking, what, 30 years on from when he started with Buffalo Springfield, that he's still putting out solid material like this. And even now, Neil Young is putting out great records. Neil Young is somebody who, yeah, he had a couple of missteps in the early 80s maybe, but nonetheless, the 80s were not his best period per se, some people think, but still, just what a strong artist. And this might be my favorite, one of my favorite Neil Young albums. I would put this right alongside After the Gold Rush, Harvest, Tonight's the Night. Just a classic album. Talking about British power pop earlier, XTC, Oranges and Lemons. A bit of psychedelia thrown in here, some 80s new wave, some post-punk. Just gorgeous power pop rock. Now, this followed Skylarking, which some consider XTC's best album. I think it's really a masterpiece, but this one is just as good, in my opinion. This had the radio hit, The Mayor of Simpleton and King for a Day, but this entire album, so many different styles on this album. They remind me a bit like Squeeze, because you've got two singers and two songwriters in XTC, but just one of those unsung British new wave bands that I don't see a lot of people talking about, but they are just great. One of my favorite tracks on here is the last track, Chalk Hills and Children. Just a moody synthesizer, ambient kind of a track. It just puts me in such a good mood when I hear it. It's just a great track at night to stare up, watch the stars, and listen to this track. But this album is great. I love it. The Loving is great. Poor Skeleton, Scarecrow People, just a lot of great moments on here. One or two songs I could maybe do without. This was, I think, a double album when it came out on vinyl, but condensed obviously onto CD, but still great. Love the artwork too, the psychedelic artwork. This looks like a cover of a late 60s record, which I adore also. Kind of too, this artwork reminds me of the Beatles had a hits collection from 1966 called Oldies But Goldies, the collection of Oldies But Goldies. It kind of reminds me of that artwork, but nonetheless, last one I want to show is one of my favorite jazz musicians of all time, Pat Metheny. This album was released in the mid-80s. It is so gorgeous. Sting was actually, his Dream of the Blue Turtles was my gateway into jazz music, jazz fusion music, I guess you could say. And Pat Metheny is such a great guitarist. There are so many exhilarating moments on this record. And it is a light, breezy kind of a record if you like Herb Alpert, but not so much with the horns. No horns on this record, but it's all guitar, synthesizer, keyboards. You got Lyle Mays, who's a fantastic vocalist. It's just one of those albums, and I put this on a playlist that I made like when I'm on vacation and just kind of kicking back, relaxing, whether you're on the beach or just relaxing on a lawn chair with your feet in the water. This is the perfect album to put on, and it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. I love it. It is so different from the other jazz that I'm into. I like kind of the classic jazz, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Thelonious Monk, all those classic artists. But Pat Metheny almost transcends I guess they call it smooth jazz or whatever you want to call it. Some people might lump him in with that group, but it is a fantastic album. Love it. Definitely worth checking out. So those are 5 CDs I need to start putting into more of a rotation in music that I listen to, because I love those albums to death. Hope you're doing great. Thanks for watching and have a great day.